On the 28th of March 2022, about 6 years after the release of the initial game, Lost Judgment received the Kaito Files, which is the Yakuza series' first ever DLC. Well, first ever good one, I should say. The Yakuza series hasn't had all too much purchasable or downloadable bits of content, but what it did have you would only buy if you were A, lazy, B, cringe, or C, the word gullible is written on every single wall of every building you've ever been in. But what makes this one so special? Well, it's a lot like Kiwami 2's Majima Saga, in which you play as a different character in their own little story. Kaito also just straight up has Brawler and Beast style, although to be fair, there is a decent amount different between those fighting styles and Kaito's fighting styles, Bruiser and Tank. But with introductions out of the way, why don't we do what RGG Studio did and let Kaito come into the spotlight and see how bright he shines. First off, I will try not to discuss the story of the DLC at all, considering there's not much to discuss without discussing the entire thing. But what I will say is that if you're one of the Japanese dub purists / English dub haters that comment on my videos whose opinion I couldn't care less about, I hope you have fun not listening to the voice of Clifford the Big Red Dog. Let's go! I'll also say that as people were expecting, Yagami doesn't physically appear in this story, as obviously Takuya Kimura was too busy being in the middle of the punch-up outside the bar between Dighead's Associates and Sega. Another thing is that unfortunately there aren't many properly animated cutscenes, and instead we're met with a lot of those press X to skip a line dialogue scenes, you know what I mean? What I will say though is that the camera work is a lot different with these scenes compared to what we normally see from these things. It's hard to describe and it's not like it's revolutionary or anything, but in my opinion I really like all the different angles and the other camera techniques that are used in these scenes. Animations on the other hand well, actually better than what you'd expect from these sorts of scenes, especially considering that this is just a little expansion, and although it came out 15 years after the initial game, they didn't really have too much time, so it's impressive for what they did. So all in all, it's captivating and entertaining, just like you'd expect from your average Yakuza story. Moving on, when I mentioned earlier that Kaito straight up had Brawler and Beast from Yakuza 0, I really did mean it. As a lot of people may have noticed in the original Judgment, Kaito's fighting style was straight up just Brawler. But in Lost Judgment, there are a few changes that they made to how he fought. Further to these changes, in this DLC, now that he's a playable character, he has access to some of the mechanics from Lost Judgment, such as EX Burst or Extreme Heat, whatever you want to call it, and Mortal Reversals. But he also has a second fighting style. While yes, he does have one less or even half of Yagami's fighting styles in the main game, but at least he doesn't have one fighting style that's stripped of pretty much all usability, looking at you, Majima. Regardless, there's still a lot of versatility and fun to be had with Kaito's stylish styles. Unfortunately, Kaito can't backflip off a wall or front flip over a person, but he can sprint on command during battles, which you'd probably expect. Some examples of the variance in his styles is that he has 2 new combo finishes, one of which is broken because it takes too long to charge and enemies just forget you're attacking them and they drop their guard. But then there's also a series of new heat actions. Now there aren't too many new ones, as there's a lot of old ones mixed in, some of which we haven't actually seen since Yakuza 0 or Kiwami 1, which is pretty cool. But all in all, with the mix of old and new, it's got a lot of flair, which I think is all very Kaito. Speaking of new stuff, the DLC also comes with a select few new songs. An official release of these songs will come either one of 2 ways, the first being that it gets released 5 seconds after I upload this video, and I look like an absolute fool, but it's probably only going to be in Japan for no reason. Or the second way is that it comes out 2 years after they release this thing, and give the songs weird names like Jizukiri the Star Destroying Kaiju, or Scented Candles, written in all caps. The DLC also features the second appearance of Fog in the main story outside of the Gauntlet, and it doesn't play for 5 seconds. And finally, the piece of resistance, but pronounced in France, is that if you ever want to mix things up a bit from bashing skulls, you can instead smash some pins or sing some... Oh. No, you can't... Sorry, you can't do either of those things anymore. This DLC also doesn't have Mahjong, which is good, but it also doesn't have a completion list, which is very good. But jokes aside, you can stuff around and play some mini-games if you'd like. But why would you do that when this DLC offers you more Lost Judgment? And who could say no to that? I mean, seriously, Lost Judgment is enough to buy a PlayStation or an Xbox, and now they're adding more? And I haven't even mentioned Kaito's new outfit, his fat ass, or the cum joke personified. If you own Lost Judgment and you're at all skeptical about this DLC, I would highly recommend you pick it up. There's just so much to it. All of this in just a little DLC expansion? I mean, what are Sega gonna do next? A battle pass for... Oh no.
Come. You should come with us. Coming?